Okay, so today we're going to be looking at my brand new player controller. It's a Rigidbody player controller. I just finished making it and I want to make it public so that everybody can have a much easier time managing their Rigidbody based players. So what it does is it's a Rigidbody based player controller that doesn't put any restrictions on the Rigidbody except for rotational restrictions. This basically means that it handles all of the walking, sprinting, and ramp climbing without any kind of messy stuff on the Rigidbody. You can add any forces you want. Now, it also comes with a movement state machine, which is really easy to add extra states to, and a camera rig with 5 cameras. One of those is first person, the other 4 are third person. Now, I made it for 2 different render pipelines because there are 2 types of 3D render pipeline that are common for Unity, the URP pipeline and the built-in pipeline. In both folders, the built-in package and the URP package, there's a test terrain package, which has some sample terrain for you to test the player controller on, and that's adapted for that render pipeline. There is the basic player controller package, which contains just the basic version of the player controller, and then there's the extra states version, which is in this folder, and that has 6 extra states in addition to jump and free, which are slide, grapple, wall run, wall jump, air dash, and crouch. Now the URP has the exact same stuff, but just adapted for the URP pipeline. Now this tutorial is going to be doing the import in the built-in pipeline just because built-in loads faster, but the exact same process is for both URP and built-in. Let's start by making a Unity project. If you already have a Unity project that you're just going to add this to, that also works. But for now, we're just going to start by making a new Unity project. Let's name it JGPC. Set the project to 3D Core, which is built-in pipeline, and disconnect it from the cloud. Now let's create our project. So first, let's import the package. I'm using the built-in, so I'm going to go to built-in. I'm not going to use the extra states for this one, just the basic package. So I'll double click on this here. Has a bunch of stuff. We want all of it, so press all and import. Okay, it's ready. Now we can look in the player folder. We have a couple of folders in here and a prefab. Before we drag the prefab into the scene, first we need to add Cinemachine. So let's go to Window, Package Manager. Now make sure that you select Packages, Unity Registry. Then you can search Cinemachine and press Install. Once Cinemachine is installed, we can X out of the Package Manager. Before adding the player prefab, let's just quickly create some layers. First, we'll add a layer for the player, and then we'll add a terrain layer. Good. Now we can add a little bit of terrain so that our player doesn't fall. Next, we have to drag our player in. So open up the player folder, drag the player prefab into the scene. So let's bring the player a little bit towards the center and up a bit. But there are some modifications that need to be made inside the prefab. So open the prefab. Now there's a lot of stuff going on in here, but let's just shrink it down a little bit. Okay, so under player, we need to go to the movement resources script. There we need to make sure that terrain is selected as the terrain layer mask. This can be changed to fit your game if you're adding this to a game you've already created. Now we also need to make sure the culling masks on the cameras are correct. So look under player cam, first person cam, camera, and check that the culling mask is set to everything. Then check that the culling mask on the brain camera under third person player camera is also set to everything. I believe that if we use URP, the culling mask setting is a little bit lower down on the camera, script. Now you'll notice that there are still some overrides that are kind of outstanding, and those will always be there just because the Cinemachine will constantly be resetting the position of the virtual cameras. Okay, so now one more thing, we've got to make sure we set our cube's layer to terrain so that the player movement registers it as ground. Now we can run. Okay, here we go, and looking good. We can jump, move around, and this is a perfect template for building a great game. Now, I just want to point you to a couple of resources under the player and camera prefab. A lot of information is kept in these scripts, particularly the player movement state machine and the movement resources and the movement state script, which I believe is in here, movement state script. And those have a lot of comments to help you figure out how to add new movement states. It's really easy. It's just a couple of simple steps, and there's a template all set up for you. It'll take a few clicks of a button. And also, I want to point you to the README, which has a lot of useful information about the setup process if you need it in more detail because something went wrong, or if you just want to look at the features or organizational strategy of this project. And if you want some testing terrain, check out in the built-in or URP packages, and there's a little package with some testing terrain that you can test slopes, wall running, wall jumping, and grappling with if you decide to download the extra states in this folder here. And it's the same process, exact same process. You just will have extra states when you're done. So that is the player controller.